Okay, we're going to, as I mentioned before, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. We have three guests who are leaders in their field, and I would like to invite them out on stage, and we'll have a discussion around this. So first of all, I'd like to introduce J.F. Gagné, the CEO of Element AI. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Vishal Chatrath, CEO of Prowler. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Eamon Jubbawy, the COO of Onfido. Well, great. It's just a great panel. Really looking forward to learning from you as much as anything. So why don't we start off, and we'll just go down the line here and briefly introduce your company and talk about what it does and why you're excited about the opportunity that creates. JF?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Jean-François Gagné. I go by JF. I'm CEO and founder of Element AI. We're a Canadian-based company. We're located in Montreal and Toronto. We're about 18 months old at this point. We got about 300 employees. Out of that, 80 PhDs in artificial intelligence. And we really focus at transforming the largest traditional enterprise in the world so that their core processes operate on artificial intelligence.
Great.
Hi, good morning. I'm Vishal Chatrath. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Prowler.io. We are based in Cambridge, UK. We are about 85 people right now, about half are PhDs, and we're a young company, less than 2 years. In the time we've been around, we published about 22 papers and filed about 4 patents. The goal of the company is really to generalize decision-making across a host of industry verticals. This year, we are going live with a hedge fund and last-mile logistics. And next year, we'll be going live with genomics, aircraft management systems, and also smart cities. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Eamon. I'm one of the co-founders at Onfido. So Onfido uses machine learning to help businesses verify the identity of their customers without needing to meet them face-to-face. So, for example, we've all been through the pain of trying to open a bank account and having to go into the branch and trying to prove who we are with physical pieces of paper and in face-to-face meetings. So we use machine learning to allow a bank, for example, to prompt a user to download their online banking app and simply use our SDKs to take a picture of their ID card, take a selfie, and we use machine learning to match the two together, verify the authenticity of the document, and onboard the customer instantly. So we're now working with over 1,500 businesses. We're about 160 people. We've raised $60 million in funding, and we're very much growing at a pace and looking to do this on a global scale.
Great. So when I made my first artificial intelligence investment in a company called WorkFusion, it was about 5 years ago, and I was talking with an analyst from Gartner, and he said, we can't even put this on a 2x2 matrix. The area of artificial intelligence is so nascent that there isn't enough companies to put on there. Now, fast forward 5 years later, and there are literally thousands of companies doing artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has a long history, going back literally decades. So with this new onslaught, why now? What are some of the enabling characteristics of artificial intelligence today, and what's different about the efforts today relative to efforts in the past? JF, wanted to start us off.
It works. That's the difference. I remember not that long ago trying to get some of the main approaches to work on some significant data sets, and we couldn't figure out how to get it to the right level of accuracy or the amount of effort required was just insane. So what happened is, a combination of trends that we probably all pretty much familiar with, computing, accelerating, more data, higher quality data, and better models. basically are driving down the costs and are enabling us to close the loop on feedback, which was the main problem in the past. Like you could get, let's say, 2 or 3 steps of a process to work, but then there's one step in the middle that needed to be, done by people. And therefore, suddenly, it means you need to build interfaces, you need to have graphical UIs, you need to make it so that people can interact and command the system, and it just breaks down the virtue of automating it. It still delivers some ROI, but at this point now, you can basically have the whole thing be piloted by AI and supported by people, and that's the material difference we've seen in the last couple of years.
I think one thing I'd add is to everything JF said is we founded the business 6 years ago, and at the time, there were definitely people with the required skill sets, but it was difficult to get hold of them. And now, it is a bit of a hype in terms of lots of people talking about it who don't necessarily understand the nuances. But that hype has definitely increased all these meetups and things places where you can meet like PhDs and AI researchers. So the glut of universities churning out good, top quality AI talent now has made it easier for businesses to start recruiting and building teams to deliver on these kind of converging trends of computing power and access to data.
Yeah, so I think just to add to Jay's point, so one of the key things was that some certain working proof points came about in the last 4 or 5 years, and especially starting with image and voice recognition, where deep neural nets were actually very good at. And that sort of laid the foundation that we can actually solve some real-world problems. And that opened up the data to come in. And the third supporting factor was that compute became cheap. So now we don't have to go and buy a huge number of computers and have that upfront capital cost. So at least in the beginning, you can scale up fairly quickly with any of the cloud resources from the majors, and to prove that. Yeah.
We've talked a bit about artificial intelligence. Another concept is that of augmented intelligence, and it really defines how people and computers interact. Is artificial intelligence a black box? Is it a system that replaces expertise or enables expertise? How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, so I guess I would sort of say that there's a big element of augmented intelligence out there, and I'm totally on with you on that. So I've always visualized artificial intelligence almost like an exoskeleton of the human mind. So through the history of human civilization, we've always had tools to help us make better decisions. So for the first tens of thousands of years, we had basically like a pencil and paper. And as the environment has become more high-dimensional in the past 5-10 years with the advent of big data, and by high-dimensional I mean that you literally have thousands, if not tens of thousands, of time series data kind of hitting at you in which you're going to make decisions. So the traditional methods of making decisions using handcrafted, hard-coded trees, which are essentially two-dimensional, if-then trees, simply don't work. And that's where methods like probabilistic modeling come in, which allow you to make very high-dimensional forecast models involving tens of thousands of parameters, which is not unusual. So your Bloomberg will give you about 10,000 parameters. Your autonomous car will give you a few thousand parameters. So how do you take those tens of thousands of time series data hitting at you simultaneously and make better decisions? Now, the human brain can't handle it, but if you can have some tool set that sort of distills the key elements of that decision-making under which the humans can make a better call, that's where the whole idea of augmented intelligence comes in. Will there be a shifting of jobs? For sure. But that's just the history. But at the same time, I don't know of a single moment in human history where any disruptive technology has resulted in mass unemployment. It's never happened. And I'm not sure it's going to happen again.
Just build on that. The way I like to present this is that AI is actually eating software. It's a new way to program. We used to encode every single condition. If we see this, then you do that, et cetera, et cetera. You use a lot of manpower to do that, encode all the conditions. Now, through experience, that happens to be done through data sets that we build, we can teach an algorithm to discover these conditions, and by rewarding or penalizing this algorithm, we can steer it towards the objectives we have. But it's software at the end. So yes, it adapts and it learns. It is a fundamental shift in how we're going to be engaging with machines around us. But at the end, it's doing more of the same things we've been doing. Now, what's different is that, at some point, a lot more becomes to feel different. But it's the same path we've been on for many, many, many years that is just picking up speed and accelerating.
Yeah, I think to build on what the guys said, essentially, there are some things that machines are good at, some things that humans are good at. Those buckets of activities are changing in nature over time, and AI is having an impact on that. But for us, it's less about who does what, and it's more about what does the customer want at the end of the day. So when we're selling into businesses, we don't talk about AI versus humans. We just talk about the problems they have. And then on our end, we go away and we try and solve them the best way possible. So when you're looking at image recognition and document verification, for example, there are certain elements which we skew more on the machine side, and there are certain elements which we still retain humans to provide a level of expertise that the machines can't get to now. And that is, I think, an internal problem to face rather than a external one to talk about. So for us, it's all about what is the problem we're trying to solve, and we work out the best way to combine humans and machines. And that combination of activities, like I said, will change over time. But what's important is the idea of machines replacing humans is I don't think necessarily accurate. It's just changing the nature of the jobs that the humans are doing.
So I'd like to just give an example to highlight JF's point that he made very well, is that the idea of giving certain conditions to kind of agents, or like a reward function by which they would learn. But also becomes very interesting that now, yes, it's a bit of software and it learns so much faster than humans. But also within software, there's an ability to coordinate these decisions like it's never been done before. So giving you an example of the financial institution with which we work, so they have about 10 quant traders. And we asked them that how often do these quant traders change their strategies for investments in these hedge funds? And the typical period is 6 months. In some cases, 1 year, and in some cases, once a quarter. But it hardly ever happens faster. And then these 10 quants are thinking about a strategy for months, then they deploy it, then they test it for a very long time, which if it goes on the wrong track, it goes on the wrong track. But then being very competitive beasts, they don't really talk to each other. So now the ability to build platforms with machine learning, that we bring this element of multi-agent systems, which is essentially like having, instead of 10 quants, 1 million quants in your fund, which are not only discovering and trying strategies at a much faster rate, but their brains are also wired so that they can interact between each other. So that really changes the game substantially.
I'd like to just leverage off of Eamon's last comment here, talking about, let's talk about how decisions are made within companies. How are you selling this? Now, you're adding to expertise, maybe you're replacing expertise, you're often selling this to people who are making decisions where their jobs may actually be at stake. So what kind of latency are you seeing in adoption around these questions for concern around the workforce, or are you seeing that? How are you selling this in to companies, explaining not only the benefits but the impact that this has on their workforce?
So the very traditional way of making decisions inside enterprise has been expert systems. And the problem with expert systems is that they are sort of born obsolete. And why I say that is an expert system is essentially a static, hand-coded environment in which you make decisions using hand-coded decision trees, as JF mentioned before. Now, the issue with this is that it doesn't really evolve or adapt as the environment changes. So they always react badly. And the state of art as of today in the industry, outside of what we guys do here, has been deep neural nets. So the whole agenda has been taken by them. But the problem with deep neural nets is that they are great at classification problems like image recognition and voice recognition. But when it comes to making decisions for anything that is more complicated than a board game, they are, almost useless because they require tens of millions of trials to do anything sensible. And in enterprises, we don't have that luxury. So you really have to think of a totally new way of making decisions, which involves probabilistic modeling that allows you to build these dynamic forecast models, which can also manage uncertainty, and reinforcement learning that allows you to learn the environment and make sequential decisions, and multi-agent systems that allow you to coordinate millions of agents for those decisions.
So I think the danger is we always look at a new technology from where we are today. And our organizations are quite static. And the reason they're static is because the cost of changing the processes, the systems, and the rules that we all need to encode is extremely high. So the golden rule when you're scaling a business, everybody's going to tell you, is narrow down your core process, make them simple, and make sure everybody understands them and scale them. And it's going to reduce complexity, reduce the chaos, et cetera, et cetera. And this is what AI is basically challenging. When you're using artificial intelligence in your company, yes, it's going to do some of the lower level tasks. Yes, it's going to learn on the fly. Therefore, what should you do with people? Well, they should think about shifting and changing the business faster. You should drive down decision to the front lines. You should be constantly having new thesis about what new data set you should incorporate, what new consumer segment you should go after, and you should have a way more dynamic organization that really is tailored to cater to the needs, more specifically with higher level of service, cheaper, to smaller and smaller consumer segment, and be able to do that at scale. And that's the big promise. The big promise is to have super large, highly efficient, highly personalized product and service offering. And AI will unlock that. So where are the jobs going? They're going into the front lines, experimenting, simulating, testing stuff, providing rewards, like stopping the system from doing things you don't want. And this is how things are going to shift. So we should not think of the static big organizations or service provider we have today and say, oh, we're no longer going to have a job. We have to think about what to do with the tool and then the new world that is opening. And I see a vast ocean of opportunity out there.
And are you seeing, Eamon, are you seeing empowerment are people seeing empowerment from this, or are they seeing threats?
I think it's definitely a case of everyone in a business is always complaining about firefighting and trying to keep up with things and being reactive and talking about how they want to be more proactive and be more forward-looking. And AI is the enabler for that. So let the AI be reactive. Let the AI learn, or learn on the fly and kind of adapt over time and shift your people from trying to keep up with to a different role where they're actually planning ahead. And that's what we're seeing with the businesses that we're talking to, is they realize they can almost unlock the potential of their people by taking away maybe they could be classed as mundane activities, but it's really a case of taking away all the reactive elements of their job and turning them into proactive, forward-thinking individuals. And that is absolutely an opportunity for them to not only do more as a business, but grow their people.
Great. I see that we're out of time here. Let me just ask one question, no more than 30 seconds per person. How are you handling privacy?
I think privacy is something that now more than ever and moving forwards, it has to be a case of privacy by design. So as a company, this concept of privacy engineering, privacy lives in your code. It's not something that you kind of talk about in the office. It's something that you have to build from the ground up. So we're thinking about how do we write product specs and how do we design sprints all around the concept of privacy rather than building products and then thinking about the privacy implications afterwards. So that's the core concept for us. And also privacy by design in terms of how we speak to the outside world. So we've just relaunched a new privacy policy which describes how and why we use machine learning using animated GIFs and images, because no one reads these 20-page privacy policies. It's about being more human in our approach to privacy.
Vishal?
Yeah, so in our case, being a UK-based business like Onfido, so with respect to privacy, we are governed by the GDPR, which is a new regulation that's come from the European Union, and we really welcome that. And I think so far, a lot of companies have taken it too lightly, which we think was not good. The right to privacy is like a fundamental right. But to be able to enforce the right to privacy, you have to take AI machine learning away from a black box approach where no company should be allowed to make an excuse, oh, it's a black box, we don't know how it works, it screwed up on privacy and we don't know why. There's no excuse. So there is all the possibility to engineer traceability in your systems, and when you have good traceability, you can handle and mandate privacy. So there's no excuse to not handle it.
JF, I'm going to save you by
I'll
the
keep
bell.
it short. Indeed,
Okay, yes.
yes. Plus, I've posted a blog post last year on my personal blog. You can look it up. There's a detailed framework I suggest when it gets to governance around privacy. I think the thing we're advocating is for the equivalent of a creating commons for information consent. Right now, technology has been going beyond the current law, framework, and regulation. GDPR is a good start, but we need to simplify the expectations and what we should think about like different situation. And we need to move beyond just providing access to data, but also consenting to how it's going to be used. So it's a complex issue. It needs to be addressed, and we're pretty vocal about it. So for anyone interested, you can talk to me or look at my blog. There's tons of information on that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.